Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. I was watching the Diversity in Comics video that really made me think about the future of the comic book industry. And when I take a panoramic look at the comic book industry right now, I see an industry that is headed towards a collapse that will be worse than the collapse of the 1950s. Now, the 1950s comic book industry collapse was ushered in by your Frederick Wortham's seduction of the innocent. And with seduction of the innocent and the congressional hearings, an already struggling comic book industry in the 1950s was sent into collapse when many publishers could not publish many of the horror or genre comics that they used to publish. And these publishers wound up going out of business. And the only companies that were really left at the time that were strong were Marvel, DC, and Archie. And with only three companies, they managed to survive. And with that, we still had a distribution infrastructure that enabled for the sale and distribution of comics to places like newsstands, grocery stores, drugstores, and supermarkets. And with that infrastructure, we had the platform for Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to usher in the silver age of Marvel Comics to coincide with the silver age of DC Comics. So there was an infrastructure in place, and even with the 1990s collapse, there was still somewhat of an infrastructure left in place. However, over the last 30 years, that infrastructure has weakened because the direct market, as I see it, is no longer sustainable anymore. Because last year we had 50 comic book stores close, and this year we had another 17 comic book stores close. And that's 67 comic book stores in a marketplace where we have only 2,000 or so comic book stores in the world. And if comic book stores continue to close at this pace, then we're not going to have enough venues in the marketplace to distribute comic books to customers. And this is something many comic fans just don't understand about the business model. If you do not have enough venues to sell comics, then the one distributor of comics, Diamond, does not have a place to sell the comic books that it prints. Because when it comes down to comic books under the current direct market business model, in order for you to sell comics, you have to meet a minimum order for printing. And if you don't meet that minimum order, then you're not going to be able to cover the printing costs for the comic books that are ordered. So most distributors, again, if you can't meet the minimum order, they're not going to even think about fulfilling your print order. So when it comes down to distribution, that's the nail in the coffin for it, because if you don't have enough comic shops available, then you're not going to have a place to sell comics, and it's just not going to be sustainable as a business. And I've been talking about this since 2011 as related to the business model and how archaic it is, because the distribution model for comics under Diamond is heading towards becoming, again, financially being completely unsustainable. Now, companies like Marvel Comics and DC Comics and Image Comics, they have exacerbated the situation by going out and producing comics that just don't appeal to customers. Now, a lot of them are desperate and they believe that they can try to make these Hail Marys towards these phantom audiences, but what they really don't see is that the big problem as related to their business model, again, is distribution. Because the direct market model that comics went into in the 1980s is declining, and it's reaching to the point where it's becoming unsustainable. And the reason why that it's become unsustainable again is because these comic shops are stuck with all of this excess inventory from these forced diversity campaigns like at Marvel, or the New 52, or the identity politics in many other independent comics, and that does not give longtime comic fans an incentive to buy, because the median age of a comic fan these days is 40, and it's creeping on 45. And when you have a median age that high for a product, what's going to happen is that's when companies really start thinking about discontinuing that product. And then when I look at comic books, again, these are the reasons why I believe that the industry is on its way to a 1950 style collapse, and something that may even possibly be worse than a 1950 style collapse. Because in the 1950s collapse, we had comic book publishing houses going out of business, and lots of pencilers, inkers, and writers laid off, and those men, they went into complete decline in depression, alcoholism, and drug abuse because they just could not find work. Now, when it comes down to this collapse that I believe is going to come in 2020 or 2022, it's going to be a lot worse, because the direct market infrastructure, again, just cannot be sustained at this point. Now, many smart comic creators, they are starting to think about moving away from the direct market business model, and they're thinking about not even dealing with comic publishers like Marvel Comics and DC Comics, Image Comics, and many other comic book publishers, and they're thinking about going to the directly to the customer by doing things like crowdfunding their own projects and trying to have their own books printed. And people like your Richard C. Meyer and John Malin with Jawbreakers Lost Souls, your Chuck Dixon with Ravage Kill All Men, the creator of Red Rooster, and people like Josh Howard with T-Bird and Throttle, and many other comic creators, they're going out crowdfunding their work, getting the money to pay for the printing costs, and then shipping those books directly to their customers. And that's where I believe comics are going. I believe comics are going away from publishing houses and going towards a self-publishing business model. And I believe that's the future for the comic book industry. And I believe once print-on-demand platforms like Amazon and Lulu start getting involved, we're going to see more comic creators cutting out trade publishers and then going to publish their own work and get their own work distributed on Amazon in paperback format and trade paperback format or comic format, or heading over to Comixology to sell their own digital comics, because it's just going to be a lot cheaper. Because a lot of trade publishing authors like myself, we went over to self-publishing, because when it comes down to trade publishing, it's just not worth it anymore, because you spend so much time querying agents and publishers and editors, that you wind up just spending money that you could have in your pocket, or you're spending money you could actually spend towards creating your own product on your own platform. And when it comes down to many of these comic publishers, they're so caught up in far left identity politics that many comic creators just don't see a place for themselves on that platform, nor do they see a place for their characters. And many other creators, what they're seeing is there is no economic incentive to having your comic published at Marvel Comics anymore under the old work for hire rules. Because if you do get a writing gig at Marvel, one, it doesn't pay that much, and if you create characters for a company like a Marvel or a DC under a work for hire contract, they own all the characters you create, and they don't give you any royalties for those characters. So many creators are just saying to themselves, why should I go over to this company and give them my best work and not get any sort of compensation for it, when they can go out here and own their own work, crowdfund their own work, and then not only retain all the rights to their own work, but make profit on their own work. So that's why I believe we're going to see more comic creators not going to big publishing houses to get their books published. What they're going to do is start self-publishing. And I believe once print-on-demand technology comes into the comic book world, I believe it will revolutionize the comic book world, because with print-on-demand technology, what happens is your costs drop exponentially. A book like this, ISIS, Escape from Transylvania, this book only costs me $2.15 to print. It only costs like 0.2 cents per page, and the thing that costs the most is a cover, which is about 4 cents. Now, the only cost I really pay is for the covers, and that's something I outsource to an artist like a Bill Walko or a Mike Williams, and that's a cost I'm willing to pay because a good cover is going to lead to a strong first impression. And many comic pros, because they draw their own comics, like Ethan Van Sciver does for Cyberfrog, or Josh Howard does for T-Bird and Throttle, or Marcelo Trom does for his Succubus book. These creators are paying their own costs for their own labor, just like I pay my own costs for my own labor when I go out here and I create my own books, like those in the ISIS series or the E-Steam series. I do most of the writing, I do most of the editing, and I do most of the page layouts, and that labor is all done by me. And many comic pros, they're willing to do that labor where they're drawing their own art, scanning, when writing their own scripts. And usually the only outsourcing that would be done would be on editing, lettering, and on a variant cover if they choose to do a variant cover. And again, that really cuts down their cost if they're doing print on demand, because if you have to go to a printer, it's going to cost a little more. But if you go over to print on demand, again, those costs drop down exceptionally. And also cut on your cost if you have to do fulfillment, because with print on demand, you don't have to go out here and print up a bunch of copies and have them shipped to you and then pay more postage to have them shipped out. With print on demand, what will happen is a comic fan will just create their own pull list and online, and then the books will be shipped to a person via priority mail or UPS, and you're going to get your weekly comics directly from those publishers based on when they're released. And you can print those books whenever you want, so you don't have to worry about back issues, because that was one of the things that I saw as an advantage to writing ISIS series books, because I originally planned for ISIS to be a comic with print on demand, is that you don't have to go searching for a back issue that's out of print, or you don't have to go out looking for a trade paperback. You can go out and buy those back books whenever you want, and you can move forward or backwards at your own choice. So I look at the future of comics, and again, I see the future headed towards print-on-demand technology, and I see publishers using print-on-demand technology to go out and publish the books whenever they want, and reaching not only customers in the U.S., but reaching customers all over the world. Because with the SJS Direct imprint right now, I not only reach customers in the U.S., I reach customers in the UK, I reach customers in Germany, I reach customers in France, I reach customers in Brazil, I reach customers in Mexico, I reach customers in Japan, and I reach customers all over the world on digital platforms and print-on-demand platforms. And that's a game changer for authors out there, and it's been a game changer for authors for over 10 years. And I believe comic pros, once they start using print-on-demand platforms, it's going to really revolutionize the comic book industry, and it's really going to change how comics are distributed and sold. Because instead of people spending their time trying to query all these editors and trying to make sure that their politics fit within a political platform like that of what so-called SJW Marvel, or that of what many people call the Portland Mafia, what people are going to do is take complete control of their creativity, and instead of them trying to have a DC label on a book or a Marvel label on a book, they're going to create their own label, build their own platform, build their own audience, and people are going to start looking for characters based on what is out there from the creators, and the stories that will sell will be based on what the creators put out there. And it's clear to me from the success of Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog and Richard C. Meyer's Jawbreakers Lost Souls and Josh Howard's T-Bird and Throttle and many other independent comic creators that there is an audience out there for comics. That audience has been waiting on the sidelines for years, and since they cannot see anything coming out of the big publishing houses, what they're doing now is they're going to support many of the independent comics and the independent comic creators out there, the same way they go out of their way to support independent writers like myself who go out and publish books on the regular. And with the future of comics being, I believe, print-on-demand technology, people again are going to be able to go out here and order their favorite books, create online pull lists, and they're not going to deal really with the comic shop anymore. And that'll be a sad thing to see the comic shop go that way. But with the distribution model right now being so archaic and so outdated, and the direct market literally becoming obsolete, because I see the direct market as something that is completely obsolete, because it does not allow a retailer something that's very important to them, returns, nor does it give us a gauge of what is actually selling, because with companies like Marvel overshipping, what they're doing is trying to bluster the order numbers up to make it look like a book is doing well, when in actuality it's not selling, because books shipped to a store does not mean actual sales. However, with print on demand, you can get an accurate gauge of sales, because when a book is printed and shipped, we have an accurate number for every book that is shipped, and for every crowdfunded book, a creator has an accurate number for how many books are sold. So that's why I see the future of comics being print on demand, because with print on demand, you are going to, one, cut your costs, and two, creators are going to get more control over their content, and then they're going to be able to control their rights, which means that if they go out here and have control over all their rights, that means people like film studios and TV studios, they're no longer going to be going to a company like Marvel to get a licensing deal. They're going to go directly to that creator, and all of that revenue is going to go directly to that creator, and those creators are going to be compensated fairly for their properties, something that was not really done in the comic book industry since its inception. And I believe that this is going to be the future of comics: creators getting control, creators controlling their rights, and creators controlling their property. And I believe that comic creators need to really start shifting from submitting to trade comic publishers like Marvel, DC, and Image towards creating their own platforms online and building their own audiences online. If you'd like to try some of the books on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming this fall from SJS Direct, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action, adventure, and romance in ancient Egypt in this fantasy flashback E-Steam series adventure. Pre-order E-Steam: The Sands of Time today on Amazon.com.